Okay. So what does that little thing do? All right. So we're going to talk about propellers now. So shifting gears, we are completely finished with fuel systems, carburetors, pressure carbs, fuel injection. We have finished with turbochargers, and now we're going to move on to the stuff outside of the cowling and talk about propellers. So one of the things that I want to read you is this, because I love it. And it was written by Orville Wright. And it's of propellers. And this kind of sets the stage, I think. So Orville says this: it was apparent that a propeller was simply an aeroplane traveling in a spiral course. As we could calculate the effect of an airplane traveling in a straight course, why should we not be able to calculate the effect when traveling in a spiral course? At first glance, this does not appear difficult, but on further consideration, it is hard to even find a point from which to make a start. The thrust depends upon the speed and the angle at which the blade strikes the air. The angle at which the blade strikes the air depends upon the speed at which the propeller is turning, the speed the machine is traveling forward, and the speed at which the air is slipping backwards. When any one of these changes, it changes all the rest, as they are all interdependent upon one another. All right. So I tell you that to say that you kind of have to be prepared that the concept of a propeller going through the air, while it seems like it's just an airplane traveling in a circle, is probably one of the most complicated concepts in all of aviation. At least it was from them. It's really not difficult when you get right down to it. But if you're coming at it with this, how hard could it be? You'll be surprised at how difficult it really is. But then if you have an open mind, you're going to find out that, well, it's not that big of a deal. Just like everything else, you can break it down into small elements and put them together, and there you are. So, all right. So we're going to talk about, first we're going to talk about fixed pitch propeller blades. Get my stuff going here. And to begin with, we're going to be talking about the nomenclature of the propeller blade so that we can all be talking the same language. And I'll write all of this stuff down, but we have, pull this back down so I can see you guys. There we go. The things we need to be aware of: we have the leading edge, which is just like a wing, the more rounded edge. You have the trailing edge, just like you would a wing. Blade tip, that makes sense. The hub makes sense, I think. The neck is the transition between the hub and the blade. So we have blades, and blades are also numbered, usually as to number 1 and number 2, so that we always have the option when we're writing something down in the logbook about the propeller and there was damage or something done to a propeller blade. You can't say the left blade or the right blade because it depends on where it was, right? So a lot of times there'll be a number stamped right in this area that'll have like a 1 or a 2, or it'll reference the serial numbered blade versus the not serial number if it's a fixed pitch, because the serial number usually goes on near one blade so you can distinguish the two. So we have, we'll have number 1 and number 2 blades, sometimes number 3 also, but usually not on a fixed. What gets weird is that the back of the blade is the part that we are actually looking at right now. What you would think is the front, the part with the sticker and the part that you see when you're standing in front of the airplane. It's called the back of the blade. And the other side, what I would think would be the back of the blade, which is not, that is called the face. And the way you remember that is you say, when the pilot is sitting in the pilot's seat, the pilot faces the face of the prop. So the face is actually what you can't see, and the back of the blade is this right here. On wood props actually have a fabric covering. Sometimes it's fabric, sometimes it is fiberglass. It gives rigidity and strength out here, and then it's got a metal tipping, which is actually something that protects it from rock chips. An interesting and very and an unknown fact, but something that is quite interesting, is that propeller tips are often painted with a very bright color out on the tips. And the reason for that is, and a lot of people think that that actually has to do with visibility, that when the propeller's going around, it's very hard to see, but the colored tips gives some sort of transparent visibility for a safety reason. But actually that's not true. As you're probably aware or have heard, was it Ford and their Model T? Model T was the first one, right? And correct me if I'm wrong on that, but one of the things that Henry Ford would said is you can have your car in any color you want as long as it's, anybody know that?
Black.
Black. And you know why it had to be black?
Because
It was cheaper.
the easiest, cheapest color, right?
I believe, unless I'm mistaken, it wasn't a money factor. It was a drying factor. That black was the color they could get that would dry the fastest. For some reason, the pigments in the paint for the metal, it didn't have the adhesion wasn't that great, and it took forever to dry. That's what I had heard. So I tell you about the Ford, to tell you about this. The problem with black paint was, and originally they were using black, the black dried really well, but it didn't actually, it was the drying issue. So the black didn't dry well, or so let me say phrase. The black was the only color that dried really well. Okay, but the black actually had really poor adhesion qualities. So as the blade was spinning, because the black, it dried fast, but it didn't stick real well. And so what was happening, because of the centrifugal force, the paint was actually sliding off the propeller. And what you had to do is you have to come out here and you'd have to trim off the paint, and then you'd have to repaint the hub as the paint slid down. So eventually they figured out that if they put a bright colored paint, which did take a little bit longer to dry, if they used that, it had a better adhesion to the metal, and it would hold in place. And so the black paint wouldn't slide off, and then you would have to repaint the hub.
How long they were,
what's that?
How long they were drying it for? Like a few hours.
But pretty much all of that was just a crock of crap. That's not true at all. I just made that up. So.
I was going to say, what the hell?
I made that part all up. I'm sorry. Couldn't help myself. They're painted a bright color for safety. So, but you can tell that story to all your friends and family and tell them, you know something they don't. It's not about safety. It's all about the paint sliding off the edge and then having to repaint the hub. People look at you, wow, would have never thought that. Yeah.
Okay, that's going to be my test answer.
I know. That's not true. But everything else I said was true. All right.
That was good. Had me going.
Okay, thank you for that.
Had me going there for a minute.
I know.
A guy at my work once told me that an airline, he told a new guy that the reason why this part wasn't working because some bogus reason up in the tail, and the guy went and checked it, and then the manager came and said, "What the hell are you doing?" He's like, "Oh, my boss told me to check this," and he's all like, "What?" And it was like a blinker fluid kind of thing. So, yeah.
Yeah, I got in trouble in the Navy for something like that.
I feel like you told us that story one time.
I might have.
Diesel.
The keys to the sea chest.
I don't think we heard that one.
Oh, it's a pretty quick story. It was on a Sunday, and I had duty on a Sunday. And when you have duty on Sunday on board ship and everybody else is gone, you're really pretty much just supposed to make sure that the place doesn't catch fire and blow up and stay out of people's way. But we had some new guy, and I told him he had to go find the keys to the sea chest. And the sea chest is a real thing on a ship where the fire pumps suck in water. And so anyway, there's no keys to his sea chest. It's just what they call the inlet for the fire pumps. And so I sent him up to the chief's mess, which he should have never have done. The chief had duty that day. And I didn't really think the guy would go through it, but the kid went up and bugged the chiefs. And the next thing I know, I'm hearing my name over the announcing system, DC2 Garing, contact the chief's mess immediately. And so I'm like, oh crap. And so I pick up the phone and contact the chief, and I can't really say exactly what he said because now we're recording, but it was something to the effect of, what do you want? I said, nothing, Master Chief. So that's kind of what I thought. So that's all. But if he told you what he said, that was the funny part. So, all right. What do we got here? Hang on. Okay. So nomenclature, fixed pitch. We have the blades. The blades. I'm not really going to write what each one of them is per se, but I'll just write the words and neck, and you should be able to go back at this and say, okay, these are the things that I have to know what they are. So of course the blades are they're the blades, and the hub is the middle part, and the neck is the part that transitions them between. The hub bore. May have to go back and forth a little bit for you. So the hub bore obviously is what is bored out right here in the center. And that's well, everything on a propeller is critical. Whereas we're going to talk about, these things are under tremendous and unbelievable loads to the point where these things are scary. They scare me. You'll never see me standing in line with a propeller. I just don't do it. I am always thinking this thing's going to come apart at any minute now. They don't, but if it does, I don't want it to hit me. But the bolt holes are a critical size. The hub is a critical size, and the hub is bored to a size that actually fits on the pilot of the crankshaft. So the whole thing is set in a certain way that it doesn't move around. So hub bore, we have the bolt holes. Yeah.
Have you seen a lot of cracks around the hubs before or no?
No, but there are airworthiness directives and such where you have to check them, especially on the 152 props. The constant speeds, yeah, they do crack a lot, and the prop shops are finding them a lot. Out in the field, we don't so much, which speaks to their resiliency. But when they're taken apart, they're usually taken apart at a point where it's like, "Ooh, man, that was bad."
So when you look for cracks on these, do you have to NDT them?
Well, that's one way to do it. You start with a visual.
No.
There isn't on most props. For us, just working out in the field, I can only think of one prop where you're supposed to NDT it often, and that was the 152 propeller. All the other ones, they have an overhaul period where you're supposed to send them to a prop shop. All right, we have the leading edge, which on most propellers, there's nothing special about it. But on the wood ones, the wood propeller, the wood props, have metal tipping. Metal tipping to protect from rock chips, to protect.
What kind of metal is used for?
We're going to talk more about that. It's like a brass. Sometimes it's a stainless steel. Now with composite props, it's actually, they're making stuff where it's a stick-on stuff. So there's all different kind of metal tipping. But like the old wooden props, it was all like a brass or a bronze kind of tipping. Protect from.
Gotta watch out for those pesky air rocks.
Well, on the ground, you get a lot of rock chips on the ground. Also in flight, you are prone to picking up in flight, rain and bugs really take a toll on propellers. And of course, you have the trailing edge. Here we go. All right, so we have the back of the blade. Back of the blade. Back of blade is, well, the way they define it is the cambered side. The cambered side. Cambered side. Well, we should think of something else to say. What else could we say that would make more sense? I might have at a loss for words. Help me out.
Mechanics view.
Okay. We'll make it longer. Part you see when standing in front of the airplane. I'm having a problem with that pin today. Front of, just see if I can erase that. Front of the plane. Assuming it's a normal plane, not a reverse thrust. or a pusher, I mean. HI, that'd be J, the face of the blade. Face of blade. And that one's easy. So the part that faces the pilot, the part that faces the pilot. We could also say it's the flat side. The flat. Say that, but not all faces are flat. Some of them are highly concave. All right, the blade chord. Blade chord. Well, just like a wing chord, it's the same thing, but the chord of the blade. It is the line between the leading edge, the leading edge and trailing edge. I know some books say it's the imaginary line that runs. Well, why does it have to be imaginary? Why doesn't it just actual line? I don't know. And then blade station. Blade station. Trying to think. See, not all of you have Aero 300, so some of these are actually new words to you. I forget that. So when you get into aerodynamics with Phil, you're going to be talking about the chord of the wing, which is something you used to cover at Aero 309, but I don't anymore. So forget about that. So we can go for my draw kind of a profile of a blade. Now, the funny thing about my blade profiles, if you will, they always kind of look like a happy whale. And I don't know why, but that was bad. But the chord is the line that runs from, and it's hard to do on my little pad here, runs from the trailing edge to the leading edge. So that's the chord. And the blade station is, and this is going to be one we're going to talk about a lot, a distance in inches, a distance in inches. Although I suppose some of the new propellers, even though this is the technical and correct definition out of your FAA, these new props that are coming out of Europe, they should be in centimeters actually, but who knows? Distance in inches from the center of the hub, from the center of the hub. All right, everybody's following me on that one so far? I don't have pictures of you. I'm looking at something else.
Yep.
Oh, I know.
So the blade station is like the station on an aircraft after the firewall.
It is. In fact, I have a picture of it. From current slides. There's my blade stations. And what we're going to talk about next really kind of revolves around this blade station and element theory. And so you have to sort of picture this in your mind as I move away from this photo, or you can pull up in your books, assuming you have them, figure 7.6, because this is probably an older book, but in your propeller section. And so our blade station is going to be from the center of the hub. Well, this right here is, we didn't talk about this, but this is the blade butt. And the reason why you have a butt here and not on the other ones is these blades right here are actually constant speed blades. So they actually come out. So if I were to look at a blade, this is exactly what it would look like. It would come out of the hub and the hub would set differently. We're going to talk about these kinds of blades in the next segment. I'd say next week, but who knows, in the next segment. But so this is the entire blade. It looks just like that, but it works just the same. So you're going to measure in inches from the hub. That's why this distance from the butt to here probably isn't really 6 inches. It's from the center of the hub out. And the center of anyway, I won't confuse you with that. So anyway, so we have 6 inches out, we have a 12-inch station, we have the 18-inch, and you just keep going out, out, and out. And each one, of course, is saying they're 6 inches apart from each other. But if you look at the profile of any blade, take a look at how this is working here. Let me see if I can pull up a pen. And you'll notice something kind of interesting, and that the chord line is going to change dramatically. It should be anyway. There we go. Now I can see the more dramatic. So look at the difference between this angle and this angle. It is quite different. And each one gets a little bit, I don't want to say more aggressive, but it changes as it goes out. And we're going to talk about this change and the reason why this is like that and how each station is its own little, I'm going to get rid of all this stuff on here so you can see it a little bit different. And each one has its own profile as it goes and what that means. And so we're going to talk about this blade element theory. And so the element would be each one of these. So as I say a blade element, just think about the difference between this one versus that one, how we go into each element. So, and I'll write this in just a second, but remember it's a rotating wing. And unfortunately, for those of you who haven't had Aero 300 yet, right? Nobody's had it now because that's the next one. So when we talk about an airfoil, there we go. It's less of a happy whale. Talk about an airfoil. We have to remember that an airfoil is based upon Bernoulli's principle. And Bernoulli's principle talks about how, well, you guys know Bernoulli's principle because you had all of this with Phil in your turbine class, right? Somebody say yes or no.
Yes.
All right. So you've had, thank you. That has saved me a whole bunch of time. I'm happy about that. I can't get my picture up of you guys. There you are. Okay. So, all right. So you know then, so each one is based on Bernoulli's principle. So the air is going to come at, well, two things, Bernoulli's principle and Newton's, third law. So airfoils work upon that. So number one, the air has to speed up as it goes around, or it does speed up as it goes around. So this increase in velocity goes up, therefore the pressure must go down, and then we have lift. And at the same time, there's a certain amount of deflection of the air, which gives us action versus reaction, and that sort of helps, that's what makes the wing work. Interesting thing about this, like I said, I used to teach this in 309, but I don't think any of you had this with me in 309, but I just moved it off to Phil and I do other stuff now. But, you know, when I got into aviation, when I went through A&P school, then went out in the field, the theory was that wings worked 100% based upon Bernoulli's principle. There was absolutely nothing else other than Bernoulli's principle. Don't discuss it. If you did, they would burn you at the stake. And one of my customers brought in this book by Wolfgang Longenstein, I believe his name was, called Stick and Rudder. And it was just this book about pilots. And he goes off on this theory about how Bernoulli's principle only plays a part in how a wing works, but Newton's third law also played an equal part in this. And I remember reading the book and coming in and talking with the fellow pilots and stuff. And, you know, one guy, he was a Navy pilot and everything. I said, yeah, this guy says it. And he's, man, you need to throw that book away. You know, that guy's just crazy. I wouldn't believe anything he says. That's where he's going with this. This is just ridiculous. And now if you guys look at your textbook coming out of the FAA, they've actually changed it and started saying that, oh no, that's actually true and accurate. So it's funny that, you know, we've had aviation for what, 110 years. I forget when the flight was, 1903, I think it was. Come on, guys. When was
1906?
Okay, so I'm close there, about 100.
In this class.
What's that?
The Prince isn't in this class.
I know. But anyway, so here we are 100 some years by. So figure right about 100 years, they're starting to figure out how a wing works. It's like, well, crazy.
1903, you're right.
Okay. I just got lucky on that one. So, you know, I guess I tell you that to tell you that, one, it's funny how things change over time and how even in my lifetime, I've seen how the theory of a wing has changed. And, but yet the design of the wing hasn't changed at all. It's like, it works. We don't know why. Well, we think it's like this. Well, no, it works because of this and this. Who knows what they'll come up with another 20 years. But remember that a propeller is just a rotating wing, so it's going to work the same way. So you have both lift being created over what would be the top of the wing, which would be, if we go this way, we have lift being created this way. So it's got to come around. We have to deal with angle of attack, because I don't think you guys dealt much with angle of attack with Phil, did you?
Last semester in aerodynamics.
Yeah, we did.
Yeah, in aerodynamics. A lot of you haven't had aerodynamics. So it's important that I need a color that's contrasting here that you can see while I'm talking about this. Purple's a great color. So as the air, I don't know why I picked purple for air suddenly, but as the air is coming up and meeting the leading edge, we'll just say of a wing because it works fine. And then the wing is the same thing as over here at the blade. As the wing hits, it's going to get the angle between the relative wind and the chord line is called the angle of attack. So this angle between this right here and that is the angle of attack right there. Angle of attack, A of A. All right. And at some point, this angle of attack is can increase. Like if I have an airplane and I put the nose up in the air, at some point that angle of attack can get to a point where the air comes up to it and it tries to go around, but it just can't. And so it just kind of flows off like this. And that's called a stall. And so the wing actually, it stops working at that point. And in an actual aircraft, what happens because of weight and balance design, the nose is supposed to be heavier. And so then the nose points down to the ground. And that means the wing starts pointing down at the ground. And if the wing and the nose point at the ground, the airplane starts flying again. And that's the safety part of an aircraft. So, which is not a big deal because as a pilot, you go out and you practice stalls and recoveries. So, but anyway, I want to remind you that, or tell you that if you don't know this, that there comes a point where any sort of airfoil will stall out. And when it stalls, it's not an airfoil anymore. It's nothing. It's just some disturbance in the air. So there's no lift being generated at all. Well, a propeller is nothing more than a wing that it is going around in circle where we're developing lift, which actually pulls it through the air, if you think about it in that terms. But it isn't just lift with a propeller. There is thrust and the air moving backwards, which then gets into Newton's law, which is pushing the airplane forward. Well, it's displacing air and pushing the airplane forward. So all of these things work together. So when we talk about a stall, make sure you know what a stall is. We talk a lot about angle of attack. And so you have to understand angle of attack and remember that it's the chord line versus the angle at which it hits the air. All right.
Measured in a number of degrees.
Measured in a number of degrees.
Kevin,
Yep.
could you repeat that part again of the stations? Is every 6 inches or it depends on the manufacturer?
It depends on the manufacturer. It's actually about every inch. So every station is an inch. This particular drawing that you're looking at right here, they're just showing you. There it is. Oh, there's my dot. Okay, they're just showing you what it looks like every 6 inches, the change. Because if we looked at it at every single inch, we wouldn't see a big change. But every 6 inches, you're going to see a pretty big change in how it looks.
Oh, okay.
Now as I think about that, man, I had a really good picture. I don't know what I did with that. I have all these really great pictures that come in my head. I posted it on Instagram one time, so it's something on my phone somewhere. All right. Discard. Okay, so let's talk about some stuff here. So we're talking about a theory. Let's see. Well, as Mr. Wright said there, a propeller. So if I write propeller and you write prop, that means you should be able to do this faster than I do, is a rotating wing. A rotating wing. It converts horsepower to thrust. And remember, we have this thing called thrust horsepower. So if we go back to the last class we have brake horsepower, which is the amount of horsepower delivered at the propeller flange. which is part of the crankshaft. And then we have thrust horsepower, which is how much horsepower is converted to actual thrust. And that is derived from how efficient the propeller is. And we're going to find out as to how efficient propellers are or are not. So we just talked about the blade element theory. All right, so each, and I'm gonna tell you what the blade is. So each section of the blade is made up of small airfoils. So each section of a blade is made up of small airfoils. Airfoils. And unlike a wing, when you take a look at a wing, for the most part, you know, a wing, some wings are made up into different sections, and you can see a difference in the tip versus the root of the wing. Actually, on most airplanes, you can. A lot of them, some of them you can't, like the infamous Hershey bar Piper, is it? Yeah, Piper, where they say Hershey bar. It's like, why is it a Hershey bar? Well, it looks like a Hershey bar. It's just kind of square, and it doesn't change. But even like little Cessna 150 that I have, you can look at the difference between the root and the tip. It's very different. So just like that, a blade is very different between the hub and out towards the tip. So, all right. So each section of this blade element theory can be any size, any size. As I said just a little bit ago, but in the picture they made it 6 inches, any size, we'll say, but for simplicity, assume each section, we'll say 1 inch, assume each section is 1 inch. Not that it matters really what it is, because the theory holds true no matter how big they are. So this theory states, that the many airfoils, each section, this theory states that the many airfoils, I'm having a real problem with some days are weird. It's like my pad just delays and freezes. The mini airfoil sections.
As we're using a lot of use.
Well, I've got it plugged into the desk here, so I don't know. Mini airfoil sections or elements are formed together to make or to create an airfoil, blade, airfoil, or I'll say blade. So all these little airfoils that go together to make one big airfoil, which is the blade, which is twisted. And it not only twists, but it tapers as it goes down. Together to form an airfoil blade. We'll just finish it off. That can create thrust. Can create thrust. Thrust when rotated around. Around a central plane. And the kind of plane we're talking about is a geometric plane. So don't ask me, well, what's a central plane? Is it like a Cessna plane? Okay, that's not the thing we're talking about. We'll let you get caught up a little bit.
In my room, I have a propeller if you want to be able to do some stuff with that. I don't know.
Well, it's kind of hard because I'm not in your room.
Yeah, true.
Because if I were, that would be creepy.
Kevin, do you like cheese and crackers?
Yes, I do.
Go on Amazon and order you some Wisconsin's Best. My grandparents sent me some for Easter.
Yeah?
Greatest shit I've ever ate in my life.
Oh, really? Wisconsin
yeah.
does cheese and crackers. No, I do.
Or
like
just as PK.
Smoked sausage and pepper jack cheese and cheddar cheese. It's out of this world.
Ooh. Yeah, PK, you listening? I shouldn't do that because he's such a kind guy. He brings me stuff. Guess what my wife bought me? She bought me some V8 juice, low sodium. All right, let's see. It looks like you guys are kind of caught up here. Where is everybody? Oh, there's Eric. I just always look for the big red background. I don't know what kind of wallpaper he's got there, but it looks like kind of cool back there. All right, next point. So each element, so you should be asking yourself, because that's what I call me, why is that propeller blade shaped like that? Why is each section, why is it fat down there towards the butt end or the hub? And why is it so skinny and tapered out towards the tip? Well, each element is designed to operate, operate at its best angle, of attack, angle of attack, since each element or section, I'll say element, each element moves at a different speed. And we're gonna come back to this different speed thing. And this is what's weird is, wait a minute, it's all moving at the same RPM, right? Yes, it's obviously moving at the same RPM, but I'm going to show you how the tips, well, first of all, you should just know offhand that if we, even at the same RPM, that the hub is making that little circle, and the hub is not feet per second or feet per minute. It is moving a lot slower than the feet per second of the tip speed. And we go back to what was the limiting factor of the propeller? Well, it's tip speed. Why? Because that's what's moving the fastest. And it has to stay well below the transonic region. So, but there's a lot more going on than that. So, but we'll just
Kevin, this is just to prevent and stall too, right?
Yes, absolutely. So, well, yeah, you want to prevent the stall. So let's back up a little bit and I'll kind of restate what I just said. Obviously, each element is designed to operate at its best angle of attack. Okay, why do you want it at its best angle of attack? If it's not at its best angle of attack, it's inefficient. It could be inefficient and then a part of the blade is completely stalled out. Well, if part of the blade is stalled out, then it's not doing anything. It's just along for the ride, and we don't need that. And also you want it at its best, even if it does produce a little bit of lift, we want it to produce its best lift. So that's why each element is designed to create the best and maximum amount of lift, we'll say lift, and thrust for a given speed. All right, so each section, so I'm kind of, in some ways I get ahead of myself a little bit with what I'm telling you, but I'm hopefully bringing it back with what we're writing. So everything we're writing should be cemented in your head right now. It's like, okay, maybe what he just said confuses me, but I got what he just wrote, and you're fine, okay? So each section may have a different chord, which is to say the distance between the trailing edge and the leading edge, thickness, which we actually just say is the thickness of the blade, measured at the well, it's the center of lift, but so it'd be measured at the thickest part. So that'd be the thickness right there. And of course the chord is this right here. So that's the chord, and that one's the thickness, and angle, thickness and angle. And the angle we're talking about, there's a lot of different angles. I could say, well, and different angle of attack, but really if we're just have a blade sitting there on a bench, well, there's no angle of attack, because angle of attack is the difference between the chord line and the wind. There's no wind if it's sitting on the bench, it's just sitting there, right? So then the angle becomes the angle reference to 0, which is the hub. So if I had the hub sitting here, if I had a, wow, this is where artistry would really be handy. And if I have the blade sitting on the bench and I put a protractor with a little bubble on it, here's my little bubble, that's a level. And I measure that, but I got to do it 90 degrees to that. Wow, this isn't going to work. Oh, I know, I just need to find that picture. I'll find it at break. We'll come back around to that. All right. We'll just go down here to 2. Pretend like this never happened. We'll edit that out. All right. Remember that the tips move much faster than the hub. However, come on, Pan, RPM, the RPM for all sections is the same. For all sections is the same. So when I talk speed, I'm probably never going to talk about RPM. If I talk about RPM, I'll say revolutions per minute. But otherwise, when I talk speed, it's that relative speed. It's that feet per minute, feet per second, however I want to say it. I'll let you get caught up with that. Let me go over here to this, where you can't see what I'm doing, and see if I can do this. Oh, no.
I know we've got a lot more to go, but just learning all of this right now, it seems insane that they made wood props for so long, and they like, I don't know, that they were accurate enough, I guess, to be the top thing for so long, you know?
I know, it's like, how do they do that? So I used to post a lot of stuff to SCC Aero here. If I can bring this up. This is one of the pictures I took. So let me see. That's not gonna work. I just wanted to make it bigger. Woo. Okay, so this is, hopefully you recognize this. You guys have been here before. It's been a long time, but that's our hangar floor. And this is one of the projects that you have in the propeller section. So this is the propeller you work with, and these are wooden templates that are made up. And these wooden templates are actually going at certain blade stations. And remember, the blade station is referenced in inches from the center of the hub. So we can pick up this bolt hole right here is probably right along the center line, measured out, and these templates go here. And the purpose of these templates is that you're going to measure the blade angle at each one of these stations. And as you can probably imagine, it's rather difficult to measure a blade angle on top of this because that's a rounded surface. Now the bottom is not rounded, it's more flat. You could pick it up on there, but this surface right here is perfectly parallel with this one, which is perfectly parallel with the chord. So this just takes the chord and puts it up here, if you will. Or I shouldn't say the chord, a line parallel to the chord and puts it up there. So now you can see with this picture, and I thought I had one other one that was even more dramatic. I'll back up a little bit and take a look, but you can see, look at the difference in the angle between these things. I mean, it is very dramatic, even between that one and that one. And that's all about getting the best angle of attack. And because this is moving so much slower down in this end, you have more of an angle. Actually, we're gonna get into it's a lot more than that. And then it flattens out as we go.
I know this might sound like a strange question, but I was thinking about
From you,
something.
probably not. It probably is.
So I was thinking about the Coriolis effect, like on a helicopter blade, like the speed of a mass increases or decreases the further out to the center it is. when it rotates. So like on a helicopter blade, the further out, it's like it spins less quickly than the middle because of coning though. But when it comes to like a airplane, like a propeller, wouldn't it be that like on an ice skater, it's the same principle? The further in it's going when spinning, the faster it is. So I was thinking like you said typically towards the center it's faster than the outside for the feet per minute, right?
We don't do Coriolis effect and stuff in propellers. That's just not there.
Okay.
That's a good picture, Kevin.
Which one you like?
Steve, that doesn't make sense.
With the engine.
Well,
This
no,
one
what I
here?
was saying,
Yeah.
This is the one my wife posted that. She has so that was me. I had a mullet. Look at that. Do you guys have not seen my coffee cup that has this?
Hell yeah.
I need to make this my my.
Is that a flower vase made out of a cylinder?
It is. How you like that? I made that. Don't
That's
tell anybody.
awesome.
And do you guys know Jeannie? She's one of the recent
Saw her a couple
graduates.
times.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, and she had just won an award for outstanding female student in a, I think, male-dominated or something with the school. I forget exactly what it was, but anyway, Dean Webb got her flowers, and I thought, man, she's a real pot. So I went back and I found these things. We have a bunch of these things. So I made her a nice little thing. In fact, since I was going to make one for Kelly too. We got to make one for Kelly. Somebody remember that. So
When we go back.
We were going to, but
yeah. See, I told you. All right. So
And-
it's almost 4:20. So I got to, and so I will let you take a break, and I'll see what I have for pictures here. So I'll see you in just a few minutes.
I got to move the sprinkler.
Is that the Ferrari you almost broke?
Yeah.
Oh boy.